Hey everybody, Chris Parry here for today's 3-minute hit. Today we're talking about cannabis, particularly Canadian cannabis, and what an absolute dog orgy it is right now of companies just screwing over each other, investors, the markets in general, consumers even. Realistically, the Canadian cannabis sector is a dumpster fire, and everybody's going down as a result of it. Fire and Flower, the dispensary chain, has just pulled the cork on itself and will be selling itself off in bits through bankruptcy protection. We've seen Choom not too long ago do the same thing, get consumed by high tide for pennies on the dollar. We've seen a bunch of companies just bloop, we don't exist anymore. Isracan, what do we got here? Chiron Life Sciences, companies that, if you're an OG, you remember these guys back in the day. They were raising millions of dollars. They were all in the game. They were all had various little, we are cannabis with growing in Colombia. We are cannabis with having a bunch of dispensaries that are named after something Obama said once. We are a bunch of dispensaries based on looking like an Apple store. All of it's gone to shit. And here's why. And bear with me here. It's the government. It's also the markets and people raising money for stupid things that never really looked at long-term business probabilities. But it's mostly the government, right? The government got dragged into allowing Canadian cannabis by people who basically took them to court and said, your rules make no sense. I have a right to have cannabis. Stop getting in the way of my right to be free and happy. And the court said, actually, that's a good point. Let this thing be legal. So what does the Canadian government do? Do they think, okay, well, there's an opportunity here. First mover advantage. We can be the country in the world that brings professional, medical, clean, efficient weed to the rest of the world. Or we can tax it on a very high rate and give everyone who wants one a license and tell everybody that they have to spend tens of millions of dollars to build facilities that are medical standard that no one really needs, that are going to constantly be weighing down on your balance sheet. We're going to allow the markets to just raise as much money as they want and sell to people that we've got a warehouse by the airport that's going to be a million grams a month. That's going to be great. Everything is wrong. You're not allowed to market yourself as a company, as a lifestyle brand, as something that might fix an ailment. You're not allowed to create novel products that the government doesn't approve of. So you're not going to expand your audience beyond the enthusiasts, right? So people who are already smoking weed, you're all fighting for that same crowd. People who haven't smoked weed yet, you're not allowed to go to that crowd. You're not allowed to create a product that might tempt them to come over and try it for the first time. You're not allowed to do discounts and specials and advertising and subscription models, and all the other sales at the gate has taken forever. Realistically, what should be happening in Canada is nobody grows weed. You should be growing weed in Africa. You should be putting it on great big container ships and shipping it over here at a cost half of what it would cost to make it locally. Now, I know that there are people who love growing weed locally and that they want to employ people, their friends and family and their town mates to do so. They want to have a nice little farm in the back 40. You know what, man? Farming is a race to the bottom, right? We don't buy our fruits and veg from farms in BC. We buy them from Ecuador. We buy them from California. We buy them from places where subsidies make it cost a lot less. Growing things in warehouses with arcane rules and security systems and standards and monitoring and admin and taxation and no ability to separate yourself from any other producer, that's a race to the bottom. That's a dead industry. And then when you do get your product out, you have to send it to the government to be distributed to other parts of the government. Like, come on, man, what other industry in the world does this? And even if you get someone to venture into a dispensary for the first time and say, okay, I'll try this. What am I looking at? You're looking at a big LED screen with lots of different names on it. You're not looking at this will do this to you. This will do this to you. You're relying on the bud tenders to give you that information. And honestly, who wants to stand there talking to a bud tender for 40 minutes? I just want something that'll make my back okay and that'll help me sleep. Can you help me out there? I'll take the purple gummies with the 1-to-1. I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. This is the experience. And then if you do actually sell some product to a normie, they can't take a shopping bag home of it because the government has set rules limiting how much you can actually walk out of the dispensary with. Ugh. So realistically, I just got off a Twitter Spaces chat with a bunch of guys that are really well-meaning, and they grow their own stuff, and they're helping a small crowd of people, and they're doing it in an artisanal way. And I'm sure that every one of them grows quality weed. But you know what they don't do? They don't grow high-quality weed outside of Canada, where the entire industry is, and I have to assume this is by design, completely tied in knots. Everything is blocked. Everything is bottlenecked. And where it isn't bottlenecked, it's government operated. You're going to grow a product, send it to the government to be distributed to a government store where some dude who grew up selling wine and beer badly is now going to extol the virtues of your product to their clientele in 100 Mile House? Dude, I don't think so. It's just not a big business. Here's the reality is the number of sales in Canada, the revenue collectively in Canada has dropped in the last quarter. Why is that? Part of it's seasonal. Part of it is that people are starting to explore shrooms. I can get LSD, ketamine, shrooms delivered to my door in the post, bought online for a reasonable amount of money. In fact, for the same as it would cost me for 2 cocktails at a bar, I can get myself well taken care of by a handful of mushroom gummies. Same effect, better effect to be honest, because there's no hangover, there's no sugar. So here's me. For years, the cannabis business has been trying to make me a customer. They finally get me to be a customer, and then I find that there's something better. So while you guys are all out there in the cannabis industry hoping that consolidation will bring an opportunity for your not making money company to make a bit more money, you're all fighting over the same dog bowl. You're all going for the same crowd of enthusiasts that already exists and is starting to be peeled away by other things that also make you happy at Third Beach on a Friday night, and maybe aren't as expensive to create, and maybe don't have all the rules that Health Canada is putting on the cannabis industry. In fact, because in large parts of the country, shrooms have been decriminalized, nobody's out there arresting people for selling shrooms anymore, even out of a retail store. But if you want to sell cannabis, well, you've got to get a license. You've got to go and do a security check. You've got to go and make sure that the community is okay with it. You've got to make sure you're not within 100 feet of a school, etc., etc., etc. And then you only can sell what the government tells you to sell, what the government will deliver to your door. And you've got to pay the government a tax that's based on $6, $8 a gram, not the $1.80 that the growers are actually getting for it. So everything's broken, everything's destroyed. So what do I think about all this as an investment opportunity? To me, the only investment that makes sense in cannabis right now is a cannabis company that's doing one of two things. One, the bigger companies, honestly, if I was on the board of a large cannabis company in Canada today, what I would be doing is setting upon a program of breaking every fucking rule. I would go out there and I would market myself relentlessly. I would go out there and I would undercut the opposition on price. I would sell from my gate. I would change the packaging to something that isn't approved. I would do all the things that would make Health Canada say, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't do that. We're going to fine you. And I would take that fine right to court where the cannabis industry began. The cannabis industry began because people decided they didn't want to follow the rules and that the rules were stupid, and they went to court and the courts agreed with them. It opened up the whole industry. Now the industry is bottlenecked by the government. The government is making stupid rules that make no sense and stop you from being able to properly run your registered, licensed business in a way that makes sense. And the only real response to that is to go to the same place, the courts, and make your case and say these rules are arbitrary. They're blocking my ability to run a licensed professional business, and I'm breaking these laws because there's no other way for my business or any other business in this sector to exist. I think you'll win that court case. And even if you don't, even if you've got to pay a fat fine, even if there's some sort of injunction that's put against you to stop you from doing the thing, you're going to get every media outlet in the country talking about you. You're going to get every enthusiast buying your product. man, to me, breaking the rules sometimes is the rule. The other thing, if you're not a big company that can afford the barristers and the solicitors and go out there and take it to the Supreme Court and make the case for everybody else, if you're not prepared to do that, if you're just a small player, I say you look at companies like Avant Brands, you look at companies like BC Corp, which, full disclosure, is one of our clients. These companies are inexpensive. Avant Brands made a loss last quarter. You know how much that loss was? $8,000. $8,000. That's their loss for the entire quarter. Not 8 million, not 800,000, 8,000. That's a break-even quarter. And they spent $4 million buying up the assets of Flower. Man, this is a company that, for me, should be going like this on the stock chart. And because the industry sucks, it is like this. To me, when everything's on sale, you go buy. You go buy everything that's cheap. Maybe it's out of season. Maybe you're going to sit on it for a little bit. Maybe it gets cheaper in the next few weeks. Maybe there's a liquidation sale coming. But while it's cheap, you get in. And right now, Avant Brands, not a client, AVNT, is cheap. It's real cheap, considering it's self-sustaining. You know what else is cheap? BC Corp. I've talked about them a lot, and they're a client, and so you can dismiss it if you want. But here's a company that is buying the cheap weed on the one end, that is looking over dozens of distressed assets every month and saying, no, not quite distressed enough for me to buy just yet. Has big money behind them. When they do find something that's worth grabbing, they can do so. A stock that is, it's just sitting around. Like, honestly, it's gone from 16 cents to 13 cents to 9 cents, not because they've had bad news, but because the sector has had bad news. So if the sector is convincing people to drop out for the summer, take that cheap stock as much as you possibly can. I know I am doing that. Not investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor. You go get one of those, have a chat with them. But for mine, if you believe in the cannabis industry at all, and there is no reason for you to do so in Canada, the way the rules are set out right now. But if you do believe that the rules will change and the government will say begrudgingly, all right, maybe these companies should be able to exist in some sort of meaningful fashion. Maybe the sector hasn't driven our kids to become psychotic. Maybe people aren't smashing into each other in the streets because they're stoned. Maybe a healthy weed sector is actually a good thing from a consumer perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Maybe they'll lower taxes. Maybe they'll allow some marketing. Maybe they'll allow a lot more exporting. If you believe that, what you want to do is not go put money into Canopy and watch them write down $1 billion every quarter. That ain't it. You want to find the little guys that are oversold, that are undervalued, and that are functionally sustainable financially, that are making enough money and keeping their costs down so that they don't have to go out and raise money every quarter, which no one can actually do right now. They've got enough in the kitty that they can exist for a little while. BC Corp, to me, it's one of those companies. No, it's not break even, but it's close. And its costs are low, and its business model, even in this fakakta environment that is the Canadian cannabis space, is sustainable. It's something that can be grown upon. It's something that will allow them to launch out in many different ways without having to spend a lot of capital on a giant facility. They're just going out there and making use of everyone else's space, putting it all together with a good brand, selling it in stores. Very low cost, very decent revenue, smart people that have done it before. They've got $400 million exits behind them. They've got billion-dollar exits behind them. Mark Lustig, Braden Sutton, like these guys have been doing this for a while. And when they get the band back together, it's not to just pass some time, sell a bit of weed out the back of the truck. They're looking to build this thing into a business, a real self-sustaining business. And right now you can get it for a song. For, 9 cents a share? Come on, man. This was 16 cents a share a month ago. And today it's 9 cents a share for guys that have the biggest exits in the Canadian cannabis history. They don't need to go raise millions of dollars every quarter to keep the doors open. It ain't about that. When they raise money, it's because there's a target. When they raise money, it's because there's an opportunity. When the big guys raise money, it's because they need to pay their electricity bill. Now, I see guys on social media every day that are enthusiasts for weed, and they keep saying, is now the time to buy Canopy? Is now the time to get in there on this and that and the other? And is, Tilray, has it come down enough? Why are you looking at the big boys? Why do you want to try and get into something that is taking 5 years to turn around and has dropped 95% of its value over something smaller that only has to have one good quarter and you've doubled, tripled your money? Why would you even do that? Look to the little guys. Go look at all the weed companies out there, filter them by size. Start from the smallest and work your way down. You will find a lot of companies that are very small because they suck. The half cents, the 1 cent, filter them all out. Look from like 6 cents on up and look to see who's got the lowest market cap and whether they are functionally a business. I think you'll find Avant Brands, you'll find BC Bud Corp. I don't think you'll find very much else. If there's someone out there who's spotted something in the wild that is self-sustaining and is a low market cap that can accelerate, please point it out to me, because I've looked at literally hundreds and they all suck. The big guys suck and have no hope of stopping the damage. The mid guys suck because they're just not attractive to anybody. There's too many of them that are dying and are for sale right now. The little guys suck mostly because they can't get access to growth capital. But those two little guys, Avant is growing and buying out other businesses. BC Bud is growing by taking advantage of those businesses desperate to sell for whatever they can get and providing a quality product when they do it. I think these two are the picks of the crop. That's not necessarily a high bar. If you're looking at it as, do I think Avant Brands and BC Bud are the best things to invest in on the stock market across all sectors? No. Cannabis is a struggle. These are not companies that are going to triple next week. These are companies that have been through it, survived, managed to avoid stacking up the debt, and are still out there throwing punches when everybody else is collapsed at the back of the bar. I realize this has been more than 3 minutes, but Jesus Christ, this is a topic that can go on forever. For what it's worth, I enjoy the cannabis products. I don't enjoy smoking. I enjoy an edible, and I think it's much superior as an experience to alcohol. That said, the amount of limitations on the ways that I could enjoy that product is really annoying. If I go to a black market dispensary, and there's plenty of them in BC, don't worry about that. But if I go to a black market dispensary, there's all sorts of novel products that I can get. If I go to a approved dispensary, government tells them what they're allowed to sell, and the government has no imagination. So the whole sector, not growing. Everyone inside the cannabis sector right now is fighting for scraps. They're fighting for the same crowd. And those guys that can do it for not a lot of money and that can just grow incrementally every month, get more and more products out there, get more and more ingenuity out there, keep that branding high and survive while everyone else is falling over with exhaustion around them. These guys are at the last few miles of a marathon and they're still running. Avant Brands, BC Bud Corp. Peace out. Oh, and if you want more of this stuff, hit the subscribe button, please, and tell your friends that there's a crazy-haired Australian guy talking about weed sometimes.